All the problems that this nation faces right now, and we face many: high unemployment, a very sluggish economy, a woeful, inadequate level of job creation in this country. Those are symptoms. They're symptoms. They're very severe symptoms, but they're not the root cause. The root cause, from my standpoint, really is the size, the scope, all the regulations, all the intrusion, and the cost of our federal government. That's the problem. I'd like to try and prove that case, and let me start by just giving you a little history lesson here. Back in 1902, the federal government spent 2% of our entire economy. So every dollar that was generated by the American economy 100 years ago, only 2% was filtered through our federal government. 5% was spent by state and local governments. So total government totaled 7% of our economy. Now, from my standpoint, that was the vision of our founding fathers. A limited government. Government close to the people. Government close to the governed. We've come a long way, and not for the good. From my standpoint, a basic premise of the genius of our founding fathers really was that government was something to fear. Not something to run to solve your problems, but something to fear. They had come from very oppressive monarchies. They understood that we did need government. We have to defend our nation. We do need regulations to make sure our private sector and our free market system works. We need a government to protect our liberties. Government is a necessary part of our lives, but to a certain extent you can consider it a necessary evil. Our founding fathers understood that. What's happened in the last 100 years? Slowly but surely, we have been trading our freedoms. I call it the devil's bargain. For a false hope, a false sense of security. Is anybody feeling particularly secure right now? No. That's unfortunate. Our government has grown from 2%, in total 7% of our economy, to now the federal government is 25% of our economy. You add in state and local governments, and we're at 41%. Now let me put that in perspective. We take a look at European socialist models that have structural unemployment of 10%, low growth rates of 1 to 2%. Norway's government in relationship to the economy is 40%. Greece is 47%. France is 53%. Now, we know how those models end. Take a look at the Soviet Union. Take a look at Venezuela. Now, there's a country that has real oil wealth, and Hugo Chavez is turning it into an economic basket case. Look at Cuba. I have no idea why anybody would want to take this marvel, this miracle that we call America, and turn it into Venezuela or Cuba. I have no idea why anybody would want to do that. For the last month, I've been traveling all over the state of Wisconsin, and I've had a pretty simple message. I've been making two primary points. It's been a very fun experience. I love being in Wisconsin. But I've been talking in front of crowds, and I'll get in front of them in the morning, they've got a big smile on their face, and it hasn't been my pleasure to turn those smiles into frowns. Because I've been talking about the very serious and urgent financial situation this country faces. The financial tipping point that an awful lot of us are talking about here. But I want to talk a little bit more first about the cultural tipping point. It's what Senator Grothman was talking about. It's what I just described in terms of our ever-expanding size of government. Until Americans reclaim their heritage of personal responsibility, of a self-reliant people, and turn away from this culture of entitlement and dependency, where we're sitting here waiting on bated breath to see what President Obama is going to tell us next Thursday in terms of his new job program. program. Let's repeal the entire Obama agenda. In America that valued hard work, that celebrated success. Remember that? Unfortunately, what I've witnessed over my lifetime is a very slow but sure drift. And I would argue in the last 2.5 years, a lurch toward this culture of entitlement and dependency. And folks, it's not an America I recognize, and it's not an America that's going to work. So let me take just a couple minutes, and I'm going to turn those smiles into frowns, but then at the very last part of my speech here, I'll give you a little hope. But it's important not to sugarcoat our current situation, because our current financial situation is dire. It is urgent. It needs to be attended to now. I do with numbers. I'm an accountant. So let me start telling you about a few scary numbers. I'm going to start slow and small, and I'm going to start building them. Well, let's first start with $1.75 trillion. That's the amount that this administration, Small Business Administration, commissioned a study, and the result was that $1.75 trillion is the cost of complying with federal regulations in just 1 year. That's 12% of the size of our total economy. It is choking off job creation. It is hampering our economy's ability to grow and recover. $16 trillion. That's the amount of money our federal government has spent since the 60s in a failed attempt in a war on poverty. The result? All the unintended consequences of those good intentions are the fact that we have more people in poverty today than we had in 1965. And people feel entitled, and they are dependent on our government. And just take a look at social pathologies for their families. By and large, the welfare system has destroyed the American family. That's not a good foundation for society. Here's the big one. Vicki was a little late in her numbers, a little old with her number. It wasn't $14.3 trillion. Right now, our nation's debt is $14.6 trillion. Now, truthfully, that wouldn't be a problem if our economy was $100 trillion large, but it's not. It's $14.6 trillion. And when you have a debt to GDP ratio that's 100%, that's a very bad spot for any nation state to be in. It's no different, folks, than a family. When you're taking a look at how much mortgage can you afford, you take a look at how much income you earn.